I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, actually, don't close them if you're driving, obviously. But picture the most tired, overused philosophy undergrad cliche in the book. You know the one.
We all know the one.
Yeah, you're in a forest. It's ancient, moss on the rocks, ferns everywhere, and there's this massive oak tree. Let's say it's 300 years old, and it finally gives up the ghost.
The structural failure finally happened.
Right. It snaps, it crashes down. It's a violent event.
Mm-hmm.
Branches are shattering the ground as it's shaking, dust is flying everywhere. It is a catastrophic physical event.
Mm-hmm.
But, and here's the punchline we have all heard 1,000 times, there is absolutely no one around. No hikers, no squirrels, no hidden trail cams.
A total vacuum of observers.
Exactly. So does it make a sound?
Oh, the question that launched 1,000 dorm room debates.
And usually when we have this debate, it goes one of two ways, right? You get the physics nerd who says yes, because sound is just a wave moving through air.
Right.
Or you get the philosophy nerd who says no sound is a sensation produced in a brain, and if there's no ear to hear it, it's just silent pressure.
It just devolves into a debate about definitions at that point.
Exactly. It's semantic tennis.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm bringing this up isn't to rehash Philosophy 101. It's because the source material for today's deep dive takes that cliche, which is usually just an abstract brain teaser, and turns it into a terrifyingly practical critique of how we live our lives.
It really does. So I'm your resident expert for this deep dive, and the document we are exploring today is titled The Silent Economy on Witnessless Worth and the Architecture of Anonymous Grace.
And I'm your host, and I have to say, just reading that title, I knew we were in for something heavy. It's by Conroy Bogle and Claude Sonnet 4.6.
Right, and frankly, calling it a paper feels a bit reductive. It reads much more like a manifesto on the nature of reality itself.
It's incredibly dense, but the core argument is surprisingly simple to state, even if it's hard to swallow. The authors argue that our obsession with that question, does it make a sound, reveals a deep narcissistic rot in our culture. We are completely obsessed with the idea that reality requires an audience.
That is the big aha moment right out of the gate. I mean, look at us. We live in an age of total surveillance, but more importantly, self-surveillance.
Oh, absolutely.
If you didn't post the workout, did you really exercise?
Hicks or it didn't happen right.
Exactly. If you didn't vlog the charity work, are you actually a good person? We have started to believe subconsciously that existence requires validation to be real.
And Bogle and Sonnet are here to just smash that idea into pieces.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to unpack two major concepts they propose. The first is imminent witnessing, and the second is the silent economy.
And if you stick with us, these concepts completely reframe the way you look at the world. It shifts the focus from the idea of the self-made individual to what they call the faceless.
The faceless, yeah.
It argues that we are not independent agents crashing through the world, but that we are, to use their exact phrase, assembled from grace we cannot name.
Assembled from grace we cannot name.
Mm-hmm.
That line actually gave me pause when I first read it. It sounds poetic, but they mean it quite literally. So let's stop hovering and dive right in. Let's go back to that tree.
Let's talk about the problem of the unwitnessed.
Right. So the source starts by dissecting why we even ask if the tree makes a sound. They call it the smuggled assumption of Western thought. What exactly is being smuggled there?
The assumption is that for an event to be complete or to have any validity, it requires a subject separate from the object.
Okay, break that down a bit.
Sure. So we assume that the tree is the object and we, the humans, are the subject. And without us, the object is just, it's waiting. It's in limbo.
Like a video game environment that hasn't rendered yet because the player's camera isn't looking at it.
That is a perfect analogy. It is a form of solipsism. We really think the universe is a performance put on entirely for our benefit. But Bogle and Sonnet ask us to completely strip away the human observer and just look at the physics of the event itself. When that tree hits the ground, what actually happens?
Gravity pulls it down. Mass hits mass.
Go deeper than that, though. The text is very specific here. The tree displaces air. That air is physically shoved aside, creating a pressure wave. And that wave travels. It hits the leaves of neighboring trees, causing them to vibrate. It hits the soil, compressing the dirt, maybe crushing an insect or two. The ground absorbs the impact, sending tremors through the bedrock.
Okay, so the event is physically registering on absolutely everything around it.
Exactly. The event is not occurring in a vacuum of subjectivity. It is happening to and through real participants.
Participants? That's an interesting word choice.
It is, because the air is a participant. The ground is a participant. The source literally says the event is fully witnessed by the nervous system of reality itself.
So asking, did it make a sound, is essentially insulting to the air.
In a way, yes, it is. It implies that the air's reaction doesn't count. It implies that unless a human brain processes the wave is illegitimate.
Wow.
But the authors argue that the sound is made fully, completely, with no remainder awaiting an external observer.
Which brings us to that first big conceptual term we mentioned, imminent witnessing.
Yeah.
How do they officially define that?
Imminent witnessing is the principle that an event is fully valid simply by virtue of occurring.
It just is.
Right. It doesn't need a second step. Doesn't need a reviewer to stamp it. The phrase they use to hammer this home is, existence does not audition for validity.
Existence does not audition. That is such a strong image. It's like the universe saying, I am doing this whether you're watching or not. I don't need your approval.
It's a massive assertion of independence. Reality is robust. It's not fragile. It doesn't flicker out of existence just because you close your eyes or look at your phone.
I want to ground this for a second because talking about falling trees is fine, but the text makes a pivot to human experience.
Right.
I found really relatable. I think I mentioned this to you before we started recording, the parallel parking thing.
Yes, the universal struggle of the parallel park.
Okay, so picture this.
Yeah.
You're driving. It's late.
Mm-hmm.
You see a spot on the street. It is tight.
Really tight.
You cut the wheel reverse, and it is poetry. One motion. You slide right in.
Yep.
You are exactly 3 inches from the curb. The spacing is perfectly equidistant between the cars in front and behind you. It is without a doubt the greatest piece of driving you have ever executed in your life. You feel like a driving god.
A fleeting moment of pure, absolute triumph.
And then you look up. The street is completely empty. Your passenger is asleep. No one saw it.
Tragic.
And immediately, be honest, you feel a little deflated.
Because the performance had no audience to validate it?
Right. There's this nagging feeling of, does it even count? If I can't brag about it to anyone, if no one nodded in approval on the sidewalk, is it real? But if I apply imminent witnessing to this everyday scenario...
If you apply the concept, then yes, it counts. Absolutely and totally.
Why? Convince me. Because my ego still wants the applause.
Because the car is parked. That is a concrete physical reality. The tires are aligned, the transmission is in park, the geometry of the street has been permanently altered by your skill.
Okay, I see that.
Reality has registered the act. The curb knows you didn't hit it. The car knows its paint wasn't scratched. The skill you demonstrated is baked into the current state of the universe.
So the satisfaction should derive entirely from the alignment itself, not the applause.
That is the core cognitive shift they are asking for. It anchors value in ontology, in what physically is, rather than in perception, what is merely seen.
And while that's highly comforting when we are talking about parallel parking, the authors immediately pivot to something much darker.
They do. They do not let us stay in the comfortable zone for very long at all.
Because if the tree falling is real without an observer, then other things are real without observers too. Which brings us to the moral consequences of this philosophy.
Specifically, they turn to unwitnessed crimes.
This is the classic I got away with it fallacy.
We all have this childish instinct buried inside us. If I run a red light at 3 in the morning and there's no camera and there's no cop, I feel like I didn't really break the law. I mean, practically speaking, I suffer 0 consequences. My insurance doesn't go up, I don't pay a fine, no one gets hurt. So in a purely utilitarian sense, did the crime even happen?
The shallow utilitarian would say no harm, no foul, right?
A very shallow one, yeah. But Bogle and Sonnet argued that this view is ontologically completely false. They say that evasion of consequences does not diminish the reality of the wrong by even a fraction.
They use some really visceral language in this section. They bring back that nervous system of reality imagery again.
Yes. They write that the wrong is witnessed by the nervous system that registered it, by the air that carried it, by the reality that contained it.
That is almost haunting. It reads like a ghost story. You think you're alone in the dead of night, but the very molecules around you are taking detailed notes.
It completely destroys the concept of secrecy. You might fool the local police. You might fool the judge in a courtroom. You might even manage to fool yourself over time.
You cannot fool the timeline.
Exactly. You were there. The act physically happened. The danger you created, even if it didn't result in a catastrophic crash, was a real mathematical spike in the probability of death. You injected raw chaos into the system.
And that chaos was real, even if it didn't manifest as a collision. It makes the world feel incredibly dense, like nothing slips through the cracks ever.
Nothing at all. And that is a terrifying thought for anyone who thinks they have secrets. The universe is keeping a perfect ledger of your actions.
But this is crucial. The authors flip this coin. If the darkness is permanent, then so is the light.
This is where we move into the concept of unwitnessed good.
Right? Think about the inverse of the crime in the dark. The act of pure integrity performed in private. The wallet found on the empty street and dropped in a mailbox with no return address.
Or the extra hour of tedious work put in to make sure a project is truly safe, even though you know for a fact the boss won't ever check your math.
The text calls these acts cosmically complete.
I genuinely love that phrase, cosmically complete. It means these actions do not need a part two.
Explain that. What's part two?
Well, we are socially trained to think that part one is the action itself, and part two is the reward or the recognition. But imminent witnessing dictates that part one is the entire show.
This is actually really hard to internalize, I think.
Yeah.
We live so deeply in the pics or it didn't happen era. If I donate a bunch of money to charity and I don't get the tax write-off, or I don't get invited to the fancy gala dinner, I feel kind of cheated.
And that is exactly because you are viewing the good deed as a transaction. You are attempting to buy social status with your virtue.
Ouch. Fair, but ouch.
But the source argues that true virtue is fundamentally non-transactional. It validates itself upon execution.
There's a line in the text that hit me really hard here. You are witness enough. You're always witness enough.
It is a radical call to extreme self-respect.
It is.
It is stating that your own internal knowledge of your character is entirely sufficient. You do not need to outsource your self-worth to an external audience. If you did the right thing, the universe knows and you know. And that should be completely enough to let you sleep soundly at night.
It is incredibly liberating, but at the exact same time, it's highly demanding.
How so?
Well, it means I cannot slack off just because no one is watching. Unobserved wrongs aren't magically lighter.
Precisely. It radically raises the floor of everyday ethical behavior. You can't turn your morals off when the lights go out.
But this intense focus on the individual is really just the warm-up for the paper. The authors take this foundational concept that unseen acts are objectively real, and they zoom way out to look at the aggregate effect of millions of people doing this.
This is where the paper transitions from personal philosophy to a grand sociological theory. We are moving into the silent economy.
This is where it becomes a literal manifesto for civilization.
Yeah.
So define the silent economy for us. Because when I normally hear the word economy, I think stock tickers, GDP, inflation rates.
Well, Bogle and Sonnet would call that the loud economy. That is the economy of explicit transactions, invoices, receipts, and corporate branding.
Okay, so what is the silent version?
The silent economy is defined as the vast, largely invisible infrastructure of anonymous good upon which all of civilization is precariously built.
Infrastructure of anonymous good.
Think about it this way. We physically trade in money, but we actually survive on trust.
That's a good point.
The silent economy is the constant, untracked, unmonetized exchange of human dignity, restraint, courage, and careful attention. There is no ledger for it. You can't invest in it on Wall Street.
But without it, the loud economy would crash.
It would completely collapse in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If everyone stopped exercising basic unwitnessed restraint, all trade, all safety, all social cohesion vanishes instantly.
The authors use this exact framework to relentlessly attack a very specific, very entrenched myth, the idea of the self-made individual.
They absolutely dismantle it piece by piece.
I could already hear the aggressive pushback from some people. I worked hard for what I have. I built my business from the ground up. I studied late into the night. And the authors aren't denying that hard work exists, right?
No, they aren't invalidating your personal effort. They are simply pointing out that your hard work was only mathematically possible because of a million silent variables that you absolutely did not control.
They refer to this as the causal web.
Right, the causal web of quiet dignities. Let's just break down a totally normal morning routine to illustrate this.
Walk me through it.
You woke up today. The roof of your house didn't collapse on you during the night. Why? Because an underpaid structural engineer 50 years ago did the math correctly, and a framer didn't cut corners on the joists.
Okay.
You went to the kitchen and drank water right from the tap. It didn't contain cholera. Why? Because a sanitation worker at the municipal treatment plant did their tedious job perfectly at 2 in the morning while you were dreaming.
Yeah.
You drove your car to the studio to record this. The other drivers traveling at 60 miles an hour just feet away from you actually stayed in their respective lanes. The traffic lights functioned correctly because a software developer tested the code.
When you literally list it out like that, it is genuinely staggering.
It really is. The staggering realization is that we are constantly, every single second, being supported by the extreme competence and restraint of total strangers.
So the self-made myth relies entirely on ignoring this background static of human competence.
Exactly. It relies on childishly pretending that the paved road just naturally exists like a river, that the water is just magically clean, that the power grid is a force of nature. But none of that is natural. It is all painstakingly maintained by continuous human effort.
It's like we are all standing on top of a massive human pyramid, but we are looking up at the sky yelling, "Look how incredibly tall I am."
And completely ignoring the thousands of people straining to hold up our weight.
To make this abstract concept highly concrete, the source introduces three specific archetypes. These aren't historical figures, but categories of people operating within the silent economy. And I really want to spend some significant time on these because I think we have all met them, or if we are lucky, maybe we have been them for a moment.
These archetypes are essentially the load-bearing pillars of their entire argument.
The first one they introduce is the engineer.
The engineer represents the concept of competence in the dark.
So paint the scene for us. What does the engineer actually do?
Imagine a structural engineer, let's just call her Sarah, to ground it. She is actively designing a major piece of infrastructure, maybe a suspension bridge or a commercial high-rise. She is reviewing the specific specs for the fasteners, the crucial bolts that hold the main steel beams together.
Okay, setting the scene.
Now imagine her project manager comes into her office. He is under immense budget pressure from the clients. He says, "Sarah, look, the grade 8 high-tensile bolts are way over budget and they are on a 6-week back order. The grade 5 bolts are half the price they are in stock, and honestly, they're basically the same thing. Just sign off on the grade 5s. Literally no one will ever know. It's going to be buried inside a foot of solid concrete."
And practically speaking, if we look at the math, the building probably stands up just fine with the grade 5s, right?
Probably. Yes. Under normal conditions for a very long time. Maybe forever. But Sarah knows the sheer strength isn't actually the same.
She knows the margins.
She knows that in a freak 1-in-100-year storm, or a highly localized minor earthquake, those specific grade 5 bolts might shear off and fail.
So she is faced with a choice. Do the easy thing, please her stressed boss, save the company thousands of dollars, or be a massive pain in the neck.
And she actively chooses to be a pain in the neck. She fights relentlessly for the grade 8 bolts. She risks her immediate social capital at work. She maybe gets permanently labeled as difficult or uncompromising by management. But she forces the issue and she gets the right bolts installed.
And here is the truly witnessless part of the whole scenario. Fast forward 20 years into the future.
Exactly. 20 years pass. Sarah might be retired. She might have moved away. She might even be dead. But you are driving your family across that exact bridge in the middle of a terrifying winter blizzard.
Right.
The wind is violently howling. The physical load on the structure is immense. And the bridge securely holds. It holds specifically because of a stubborn decision made in a quiet, fluorescent-lit office 2 decades ago by a woman you will absolutely never meet.
And I don't thank her. I don't send her a card. I don't even know she objectively exists. I just complain about the terrible traffic on the bridge.
You blindly assume the bridge is safe by some kind of structural magic. But it is safe by grace. It is safe because someone firmly refused to cut a tiny corner when absolutely no one was watching them.
That is the silent economy in action.
We entrust our fragile lives to these invisible, hyper-competent decisions every single day without a second thought.
That is incredibly humbling. Okay, let's move to the second archetype they present. The stranger.
The stranger represents a different kind of grace. It represents restraint.
This one feels far less technical than the engineer and much more psychological or behavioral.
It absolutely is. You see, we inherently tend to view human history as a long list of things that visibly happened. Wars, treaties, riots, economic crashes. But the silent economy is heavily made up of the things that didn't happen.
The negative space of history.
Yes, perfectly said. Think about a standard moment of severe road rage. We have all been there.
Unfortunately, yes.
Someone cuts you off incredibly aggressively on the highway, almost causing a wreck. Your heart rate instantly spikes to 140 beats a minute. You have a massive split-second adrenaline impulse to physically escalate the situation.
Right, to tailgate them, to roll down the window and scream at them, to throw your coffee cup at their car.
The primitive lizard brain entirely takes over your decision-making. But then in that crucial half-second gap, you don't do it.
You take a deep breath.
You take a breath, you tap the brakes, you consciously let them speed away.
And the entire terrifying incident simply dissolves into nothing.
The incident never technically exists in the historical record. There is no violent multi-car accident. There is no grim police report. There is no viral video of a fistfight on the shoulder of the highway.
And strictly because it didn't happen, no one ever gets any credit for stopping it.
Exactly. You do not get a shiny medal from the mayor for not causing a pileup on Interstate 95.
Right.
But that completely invisible act of restraint, that microscopic moment of actively choosing peace over your own bruised ego, literally saved the timeline.
Because you never know what the other driver's going through.
Precisely. Maybe that aggressive driver was carrying a weapon. Maybe they were on the absolute edge of a psychotic breakdown. Maybe if you had laid on your horn, they would have completely snapped. You successfully de-escalated a potential tragedy without anyone knowing.
The stranger is the random person who voluntarily breaks the chain of toxicity.
Yes. We are the daily beneficiaries of all the terrible things that didn't happen to us today. The violent fight that didn't break out at the crowded bar, the devastating insult that wasn't spoken by a stressed partner, the metaphorical trigger that wasn't pulled.
It is genuinely weird to try and feel deep gratitude for non-events. It's like walking around saying thank you for not punching me in the face today to everyone you meet.
It sounds like an incredibly low bar, I know. But civilization absolutely depends on it. If everyone acted on every single aggressive impulse they had, society would grind to a violent halt in under an hour. We rigidly rely on the silent restraint of millions of strangers just to get through a Tuesday safely.
Okay, the third archetype. This is the one that touches on the future, the planter.
The archetype of forward grace.
This immediately brings to mind that old Greek proverb, right? Society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in.
Bogle and Sonnet take that exact proverb very literally. The planter is the individual who actively engages in massive projects with timelines fundamentally longer than their own biological lifespan.
In our modern, hyper-obsessed, quarterly earnings corporate world, this kind of person seems like a total anomaly.
They are a massive glitch in the modern system. We are completely obsessed with immediate return on investment. But look at the great historical architectural achievements. Look at the massive cathedrals of Europe.
Or the Sagrada Familia in Spain.
Yes. Or even shifting to technology, the early foundational internet protocol.
Wait, how do the internet protocols fit the cathedral builder analogy?
Well, the architects who laid the initial heavy stone foundations of a medieval cathedral knew with 100% absolute certainty that they would be physically dead long before the final dome was finished. They were meticulously laying heavy stones for a beautiful ceiling they would never get to see. They were solving complex engineering problems for a generation of worshipers not yet born.
And the tech pioneers.
The idealists in the 70s and 80s who designed the basic communication protocols of the internet were building a digital cathedral. They just wanted systems to connect the world globally. They weren't building it to monetize it the next year.
There's a line in this section of the text. These acts leave no invoice.
They leave no invoice because the ultimate recipient isn't even born yet. The recipient doesn't have a mailing address. It is a pure, unadulterated gift. It is the act of sending extreme value forward in time.
And we today are the ones currently sitting comfortably in the shade of those trees. We are the ones casually using the internet protocols designed by those forward-thinking idealists. We are walking our dogs through the beautiful municipal parks designed by visionary city planners a whole century ago.
And we completely take it all for granted. We assume the park was just naturally always there. We utterly forget that someone had to aggressively fight City Hall for that empty land. Someone had to fund and plant the fragile saplings. Someone had to design the underground drainage systems.
So when you stack these three archetypes together, the engineer providing competence, the stranger providing restraint, and the planter providing foresight, you realize that the entire architecture of our daily lives is not accidental in the slightest.
It is highly constructed. It is a deliberate, ongoing artifact of human goodness and effort. And once you truly see that structural web, well, you can't unsee it. You look at a city and see a monument to invisible grace.
But the authors argue that seeing this creates a profound problem for us.
Yes, a massive problem.
Which honestly confused me at first because I thought this was the uplifting, feel-good part of the deep dive.
It does feel good to finally realize you are supported by a net of humanity. But receiving that support creates a massive, unpayable debt. And this brings us right into Section 5 of their argument, the forward obligation.
They call this the peculiar debt.
Yes.
Why peculiar? Because usually in our society, debt is highly transactional and linear. I borrow $1,000 from you, I owe you $1,000 plus interest, I know exactly who you are, I can just write you a check or wire you the funds to settle the account.
Right, it's a closed loop. But you cannot write a physical check to the weary engineer who successfully designed the safety tolerances on the Golden Gate Bridge decades ago.
And I clearly can't track down and thank the stranger who decided not to sideswipe me on the freeway back in 2018. The vast majority of our creditors in this economy are fully invisible, completely anonymous, or long dead, so I am essentially in massive debt to ghosts.
You are in deep, unquantifiable debt to the faceless. That is the categorical term the authors use. The faceless are the millions of anonymous individuals who systematically make your continued life possible.
So if I accept this premise, how on earth do I pay them back? The ledger seems hopelessly unbalanced.
The brilliant catch of the silent economy is that you cannot pay them back. It is physically impossible. You can only pay the massive debt forward.
Now, this starts to sound a little bit like the plot of that old movie, Pay It Forward. Is this philosophy really just advocating for random acts of kindness, like paying for the coffee of the guy in the drive-through line behind me?
This is a crucial distinction the text makes, so we need to be very clear here. They explicitly distinguish between charity and citizenship.
Okay, break that down.
Buying someone a latte in the drive-thru is very nice. It is a lovely gesture. It is charity. It gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling for the morning. But actively participating in the silent economy is absolutely not charity. It is what they rigidly define as structural participation.
What is the functional difference between the two?
Charity is fundamentally optional. It is extra credit for your soul. Structural participation, however, is completely mandatory if you want society to exist. If you mentally accept the premise that you are safely standing on a sturdy bridge built by the sweat of others, you inherently have a profound moral obligation to maintain the structural integrity of that bridge for the very next person walking behind you.
So it's not a matter of, I'm such a nice guy for doing this favor. It is literally, I am just pulling my required weight in the system.
Exactly. You are just paying the rent for occupying space in civilization. The host, you actually brought up a great point about paying taxes earlier when we were prepping for this.
Yeah, my initial thought was, well, I faithfully pay my taxes every year. Doesn't that fully cover my debt to society? I funded the road repairs.
And their answer is no. Taxes pay for the raw physical asphalt. Taxes pay the hourly wage of the road crew.
Right.
But taxes absolutely do not pay for the meticulous, invisible care required to lay that asphalt perfectly so it doesn't form a massive pothole in 2 years. Taxes do not pay for the tired delivery driver to patiently stop at the pedestrian crosswalk when he is running 20 minutes late for his route.
Because money fundamentally cannot buy integrity.
Spot on. The silent economy runs entirely on the massive accumulated surplus of human integrity that cannot ever be bought or sold on an open market. So successfully paying your peculiar debt means you must aggressively become a daily producer of that specific integrity.
I have to voluntarily become a member of the Faceless for someone else.
You have to accept your exhausting role as a load-bearing pillar. You are not permitted to just be a passive consumer of societal safety. You must actively be a generator of safety. You are not just a consumer of competence. You must be a relentless generator of competence in your own sphere.
It totally redefines the incredibly boring, mundane parts of adult life. It means that when I'm doing a mindless, tedious task at work, and I'm highly tempted to just phone it in because it's Friday afternoon, I'm not just mildly cheating my annoying boss, I am actively weakening the invisible infrastructure of the world.
You are consciously choosing to put a cheap grade 5 bolt into the complex machinery of civilization. And sure, maybe the machine won't violently fail today or tomorrow, but you are undeniably degrading the baseline quality of the world for the completely innocent person who comes after you.
That is an incredibly heavy psychological burden to carry around all day, but at the same time, it's deeply dignified.
It really is. It dramatically ennobles the completely ordinary everyday life. It essentially tells the quiet night shift janitor, the exhausted code tester, the frustrated single parent, the overlooked bus driver, what you do fundamentally matters to the universe. Not because you get a silly Employee of the Month plaque, but because reality physically registers your careful attention.
Which beautifully leads us straight into their conclusion. Section 6, The World We Owe.
The thesis statement of the conclusion is that we owe the world in kind.
In kind, meaning we have to pay the debt back, using the exact same currency we originally received. We safely received silent, untracked, anonymous grace. So we must consciously give silent, untracked, anonymous grace.
And we must do it without ever waiting for social permission or digital applause. This ties the whole paper together back to the beginning. Remember the falling tree.
The tree doesn't wait for an audience to fall.
Exactly. And you shouldn't wait for an audience to be good.
There's a really fascinating philosophical pivot the authors make right at the very end of the text. They actually turn around and harshly criticize their own academic field of philosophy.
They absolutely skewer it. They argue that modern philosophy is way too obsessed with epistemology.
Epistemology meaning the study of how we know things, what can be scientifically proven, what is the observable empirical evidence for a claim.
Right. But Bogle and Sana argue that we need to spend an equal massive amount of intellectual energy on ontology, on what is functionally real, precisely because it does not arrogantly wait around to be observed by us.
They are essentially bugging us to value the dark matter of human ethics. Just because you can't readily see it through a telescope doesn't mean its gravitational pull isn't the only thing holding the entire galaxy together.
That's a stunningly accurate analogy, actually. The unseen mass is what prevents everything from flying apart into the void.
And then right at the close, they beautifully circle back to the forest from the introduction.
The grand return to the starting premise.
The sound the massive tree made fully and completely in the supposedly empty forest that was actually never truly empty at all.
Because the forest was completely capable of witnessing itself, the soil, the air, the leaves, they all bore witness. And just like that ancient forest, human society is constantly witnessing itself. We're all deeply, intimately witnesses to each other's existence, even when we are total strangers passing on a crowded sidewalk.
It really profoundly changes how I look at a massive crowd of people now. I used to walk through a busy train station and just see annoying physical obstacles, people I had to dodge, people in my way. Now I look at that same crowd and I see my creditors.
You see the exact people who are silently holding up the sky above your head.
So what do we actually do with this massive realization? Because on this show, we always want to leave our listener with something highly actionable, not just, oh, wow, that was a really deep thought, but something to practically implement.
Well, the authors intentionally leave us with an open-ended philosophy. It's technically unfinished by design. It absolutely requires our continuous daily participation to functionally work.
So here is the specific challenge for you, the listener, for this week.
Let's lay down the gauntlet.
If the concept of the silent economy is objectively real, then right now, literally at this exact second, as you are casually listening to my voice, someone you will never ever meet is diligently doing something that physically protects you.
It is happening right now.
Maybe an exhausted mechanic in a poorly lit garage is triple-checking a worn brake line on a massive 18-wheeler that'll blast past you on the highway tomorrow morning.
Or maybe a frustrated medical researcher is staring bleary-eyed into a microscope, running a tedious trial for the 50th time, looking for a cure for a rare disease you might unexpectedly develop in 10 years.
And you cannot ever thank them. You can never settle that ledger directly.
The debt is permanently transferred to you.
So the burning question is, what specific act of anonymous quiet grace will you perform today to help balance the cosmic books?
And here's the absolute hardest part. Don't tell a single soul about it.
Oh, that is the incredibly hard part. Do something genuinely good and absolutely do not tell your partner about it over dinner. Do not post a humble brag about it online. Do not seek the social validation.
Return the stray shopping cart to the metal corral even though it's pouring freezing rain and you parked at the very back of the lot.
Quietly fix the glaring mathematical error in the shared departmental spreadsheet that literally no one else spotted so your coworker doesn't look stupid in the meeting.
Let the panicked aggressive person forcefully merge into your lane in heavy traffic without honking.
Be the meticulous engineer. Be the restrained stranger. Be the forward-thinking planter.
Actively, violently contribute to the silence.
I think that is absolutely the perfect place to wrap this up. This has been, wow, it's been a lot, but in a really fantastic, challenging way.
It is a total aggressive perspective shift. Once you finally see the silent economy functioning around you, you truly see it everywhere.
I am definitely going to be nervously thinking about the sheer strength of those steel bolts in the bridge all the way on my drive home today.
Just drive carefully and stay in your lane. That is your immediate contribution to the rest of us.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much for diving deep into this fascinating source material with us today. Keep your eyes wide open for the invisible infrastructure around you. And please always remember, you are witness enough. We will see you next time.
Take care of yourselves and each other.